introduce our wonderful speaker. She should be known to some of you this evening. Jennen. Tina is a connector and a lateral thinker who teaches and grows innovation and entrepreneurship throughout the North Island. Tina is currently, up until tomorrow, CEO of a company that she'll go on to explain she's undergoing some change with. Tina is a member of Enterprise Angels and the Institute of Directors, and in her consultancy up until now has been specialising in executive leasing, helping people get the best out of what they have. She's also a guest lecturer at Waikato University. And the talk this evening is on a topic that some of you might not have heard the expression, but I think you all relate to the phenomenon she'll go on to explain. So without further ado, lovely to have you, Tina.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yes. Great. So we'll start by saying, why did I choose lateral leadership as my topic? I think it's important for you to understand what my drivers were. And the way I see it, lateral leadership is the most important thing that underpins all the things we do. Because the way that we see the world is then the way that we meet the world. It's the way we interact in the world. And the way that we interact in the world is how the world then meets us. So I hope to share with you a few things about what I've learned about lateral leadership. And as has already been discussed, it's an interactive session. It would be great if you don't agree with me. I'd love to hear about that because that's where we'll learn together. So please don't be shy. So, lateral leadership. Just before we start, as a summary, I did lots of research to say, what do I think about lateral leadership as it relates to others? And this is the summary that I ended up with. There's lots of stuff you can read online. But to me, lateral leadership is a lifestyle. It's a way of being. You don't turn it on and off. You do it at home. You do it at business. You do it when you socialize. It's a lifestyle. And it's very, very people-centric. Lateral leadership is about alignment. Aligning the things that you do so they're connected. Synergy, integration. It's about the interconnectedness of the things that we do and how that shapes us and how that shapes others. Lateral leadership is situational. So sometimes we lead, sometimes we follow, sometimes we get out of the way so other people that are better than us can do it. That's what lateral leadership is about. It's proactive, it's non-hierarchical. It has nothing to do with your title. It doesn't matter if you're the janitor, if you're the CEO, if you're a teacher, if you're a parent. Lateral leadership is relevant in anything that we do as human beings. It's doing the right things instead of doing things right. And there's a big difference. So doing the right things instead of doing things right. Sometimes we get so focused on doing things a certain way that we get lost and we're actually not even doing the right thing, even if what we're doing is we're doing well. It's additive, which means and. It's not and or, it's and. It's exponential and it's system focused. It's creating networks. It's open-minded, agile, resilient. Also look up the C's of leadership. There's lots of different versions of the C's of leadership, but it's courage, it's communication, it's collaboration, it's confidence. All of those things that are part of the standard leadership models. In a summary, value-based, purpose-driven value creation. So you take your own personal values, you tie them to a greater purpose, and you allow that to create value for others. That's what lateral leadership is about. But let's get on to some stories. This is the hierarchy that we know. We have the traditional organization, top down. I'm the leader, you're the follower. You do it my way. Follow me, I'll take you where you need to go. Or more recently, we have the upside down organization, which is where the leader is the support person. Let me empower you. These are both well-known models, and the second one I think works quite well, but it's still constrained. What I'm suggesting is instead of a linear path between leader and follower, regardless of the order, lateral leadership is exponential. It mimics more of a DNA strand than it does an arrow or a line. Which way you go, where you lead and follow within that system, completely depends on the purpose behind what you're doing. It's not linear, it's not predictable, aside from the fact that it's with a common purpose. Lateral leadership is much more about a system. How are we able to get those triangles out of that system to see the network for what it is? Most of it's mindset. I think we all know that. This is a typical list of what we need to think about to step outside of the box. Exploring new things, acting in spite of fear, embracing change, embracing things we don't know. We often live inside of our comfort zone. It's easy to live within what you know. Carol Dweck, one of my favorite writers on mindset, talks about the difference between growth and fixed mindset. This is really, really useful tool set. Fixed mindset basically says what I have as my intelligence, what I have as my skill set is just what I have to use into the future. I can't change it. I can't really grow past it. Growth mindset says it's fluid. What I have today may not be what I have tomorrow. It's completely up to me to change that. It's really about the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset is that the challenges, the obstacles, the effort, the criticism, and the success of others is exactly opposite on both sides. Fixed mindsets struggle with challenges. They have trouble overcoming obstacles. They have a hard time taking criticism, and they have a hard time letting others succeed because they feel like that's taking away from them. Growth mindset, exactly the opposite. They see all of it as a learning opportunity. Learn from the criticism. Failure is feedback. We've all heard that before. If you have an open growth mindset, when you fail, it's just another step along the path. Great, I'm going to take that on board and I'm going to keep going. It's letting other people grow with you. It's getting out of the way and letting other people be better than you because other people have skills than you do in certain ways. It's perfectly fine. One of the other mindsets is zero-sum game. Again, I win, you lose. If I'm right, you're wrong. This is a common mindset with the idea that we become antagonists. We're opponents. We're competing for the same prize. When in reality, the non-zero-sum game, which is really the human approach, is that we're connected and we've got an overlapping interest, even when we haven't identified it. There's always common interest between people, even when they don't see them. Non-zero-sum game allows us to see that we're partners and that we have a stake in each other's success. This is much closer to what we are as human beings and our connectedness. This is a water atom, actually. And what it's showing us is that we're connected whether we know it or not, and whether we choose to accept it or not. And all of the systems that we're in, whether it's our family system, our business system, our social system, connects us with people. Sometimes it connects us with people that we don't want to be connected to. Sometimes it connects us to people that we really love spending time with. Regardless, we're connected. And it's having an awareness of that, being open to what that means, and actually starting to direct that relationship that allows you to be a lateral leader. This quote I came across a few days ago from Suze Reynolds. And it's a very long quote, but I loved it because it summarizes in the angel space. So Suze Reynolds runs the Angel Association of New Zealand, and she is the epitome of lateral leadership. She looks at the greater good. She leads for the betterment of the whole, categorically. And she talked about when we invest in startups, are we founder-focused or are we investor-focused? So technically, the Angel Association is investor-focused. It's a big network of investors. They would be investor-focused. But in reality, if it's a zero-sum game, the deals don't work. And so what she said here is it's a universal truth that we achieve much more working with each other than against each other. What's more, very few of us achieve as much on our own as we do together. And this is certainly true in early stage investment. In this endeavor, no one ever achieves success on his or her own. We have to do it together. And when we're negotiating something, if we negotiate against a founder as an investor, then how are they going to get out of bed the next day and work hard with that investment money? It actually doesn't work, which is why we have to understand the interconnectedness of things. To be success-focused, which is what she's saying here, why not be success-focused, which is that unified approach, which is that shared value, rather than saying that you're investment-focused or founder-focused?
So Tina, to that extent, particularly when it's not a zero-sum game, when people are working in an organization and the organizational culture is very much fight for market share, hit your numbers, regardless of what it takes, you must. Yeah. I guess at times it's going to be an awkward conversation, say, no, it's about mutually winning. What's your tip on how do you embrace that, or how do you take that conversation on if you are employed by a company like that?
Well, I think in large organizations where there's a culture that's quite fixed, you just need to start small. And I think starting small is finding those leadership moments within the organization itself. It's not necessarily going to that high level of saying, well, we're going to start collaborating with our biggest competitor. That wouldn't be the first goal. You first have to start by just saying interdepartment. How about if you just get two departments that probably compete against each other for budget to start collaborating and start finding their overlaps? There's a lot of leadership moments that you can find within organizations that you can change the internal culture, but then that allows you to then go external with that culture.
And is the view that if you start internally departments, eventually it seeps its way up?
It absolutely does, because one person modeling the difference, taking the risk and actually saying, hang on a minute, let's build each other up rather than tear each other down, for example, is the starting point for other people to be able to do the same. And once you give yourself permission and allow other people to experience that, they start to give themselves permission. And that's how the leadership grows.
Gotcha. So can you share with us, who are the room winner, what are iconic businesses that do this, or iconic leaders that demonstrate it?
I think Richard Branson's a good example.
Great example.
Because he is, he's walking the talk, in his business, out of his business, and he's encouraging people in spite of, his own lack of ability in other ways, letting other people rise up and showing that it takes all of us to create that team. Right, and also the collaboration is there.
And presumably the Angel Association comment there is you don't have to be a billionaire to start doing that either. Startups as an ethos celebrate it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I mean, angel investing, and I think that's a real misnomer, and it's good that you pointed out. Angel investors in New Zealand are just successful business people like a lot of the people in the room. They're just choosing, instead of putting their money into philanthropic activity, they're investing their money in high-risk startups in an effort to do what they love and to back people using the skill set that they've learned in their own profession.
You're right.
Great. Anything else? Any questions from the room? Very nice. Yes.
Interesting. I understand this is a business conversation, business talk, but do you think that there's any advantage or positives that could come if politics looked at this construction of argument versus demolition of argument and how that would apply to filter down to the rest of the country in terms of...
Yeah, that's a can of worms. Well done.
So for those that are tuning in, John Key's in the audience, and he just there was a question that was posed: Could politicians learn and benefit from a similar approach?
Absolutely. I think that anyone, and clearly politicians have been put into this position where they're fighting for the vote, and it's winner takes all. So it is very much zero-sum game in that regard, and they almost become non-human in the process. And I think that personally, that if politicians found a way to dig deep and have their, find the courage to continue to be human in spite of the battle that they're in to get elected, that they would improve their odds. And it certainly would improve the experience for all of us, wouldn't it? Yeah, well, let's hope that that doesn't happen.
That's right.
Okay, where were we? Anyway, to summarize what Sue said, growth doesn't happen in isolation. You know, we all talk about, the overnight successes, but in reality, all the growth, whether it's individual growth, business growth, growing the GDP, it happens in lots of little ways where then finally something connects and then it becomes exponential. It doesn't happen because one person did it. It is a system that creates the opportunity. What are those values that bind us? And again, I'm using the DNA chain because it is actually way more applicable to us as human beings to use the DNA chain than it is to use a triangle for our hierarchy. These are the things that came out of IDEO. I really like this list. There's lots of lists you can use, but this one's quite good. What are those things that bind us together? Optimism, collaboration, learning from failure, embracing ambiguity, talk less and do more, take ownership, and make others successful. These are the things that bring us together. These are the things that create those common touch points. If you are able to do those things together, you bring people together rather than pushing them apart.
And wonderfully, presumably, they're all things that we've all done, but probably when we were children.
Exactly. Yeah. These are things, and that is, again, thank you for the reminder, why I use the DNA chain. This is embedded in us as human beings. We just forget us and make us actually forget the normal stuff that we were born with. And it really is just going back to what we were given as a child. So getting to just a couple of frameworks that I use that I think are quite useful. First one, curiosity is critical. Curiosity is at the foundation of, so curiosity is, it underpins creativity. Creativity underpins innovation, and innovation is what underpins entrepreneurship. Okay? So creativity is the base level. And what have we been given? Curiosity killed the cat. Who's heard this before? Does everybody in the room know this? It's commonplace, isn't it? It is actually a lie. Can I repeat that? It's a lie. This is what transformed from the original form in Shakespearean time was actually care killed the cat. And in Old English, care actually meant worry. So it was worry that killed the cat, which is completely opposite of what we've been given. So let me just tell you, don't overuse your imagination by worrying, because that's what killed the cat, not curiosity. I hope that clears up that matter. Looking at curiosity and connection from Da Vinci, I love this list, so I just wanted to share it because this was a very, very curious man. We've put him on a pedestal because he's invented all of these amazing things. Well deserved. But he was just an incredibly curious man. And look at the list. And look at the interconnectedness of the list. Curiosity is at the foundation of everything. And it is in the curiosity, if you look at a list like this, and then you go out to achieve this list, that you have to interact with other people and your environment to be able to understand the things that are on this list. And that is why curiosity is a currency. Curiosity is a form of exchange, and it's a way to open doors of other people's minds and your own mind. It's a way for you to build connection with other people. It's a way for you to build networks. Simple thing that we learned as a child is powerful.
It's quite a cultural flip, though, isn't it? Because as someone running a business, small to mid-sized business in New Zealand, you could argue that curiosity gets replaced with responsibility, because I've got to pay the wages, I've got to make sure the supplies on details. But yet incredible businesses are successful because they nurture that sense of curiosity through the entire organization, that it doesn't have to be one person's responsibility.
Exactly. It's a mindset. It's a lifestyle. just like lateral leadership, which, curiosity is a cornerstone for that. What I would say is the responsibility to your customer, the responsibility to your stakeholders, your investors, your board, your responsibility to acquire regular and ongoing curiosity.
Yes, responsibility to yourself is actually really important and probably a good starting point on responsibility.
Well said.
Absolutely agree. And what would you say that your responsibility to yourself as it relates to curiosity, or your responsibility to yourself as it relates to something else?
Your responsibility to yourself as it relates to curiosity would be the ability to be creative, the ability to feel good, the ability to wake up in the morning before you go to work and feel really good about doing that, waking up in the morning.
Exactly.
And when you enter the workplace, you have a smile and you create that creativity as you move forward in the workplace.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Thank you for that.
Really well said.
And if we want to learn what the next great product is for our customers, we have to be curious. And that directly affects the bottom line. At a bare minimum, even if we call the other stuff, the value add. Sorry, this isn't working. Oh, there we go. So, up. Okay. So curiosity. The first framework to grow your curiosity is something, again, that we learned as children. And it's something that we're actually taught in the MBA as well, which is the 5 whys. If you ask why long enough, you end up getting to the root cause of something. And whether that's a problem you're having internally that you're chewing on in your own mind, or a problem you're having with a customer, a client, doesn't matter. If you ask why enough, and you're willing to be curious enough to get the answer, and you're willing to be courageous enough to get the answer within yourself, and not judge yourself for what that ultimate core why is, you'll actually get to the root cause of anything that you're dealing with in any environment. And that's powerful. And again, something we learned as children.
And there's an irony too, though, isn't there? Because we've had the wonderful Frances Valentine as part of Spark Lab, and what she would comment on is kids get told off now for asking why too many times by mum or dad, or certainly by teachers at schools, because, now's not the time to dance, now's the time to get on with it. But yet it's so important for what they'll go on to be as people.
It's critical.
So for the parents in the room, how do you navigate that? How do you encourage it?
Well, I think that's where leadership becomes important. How many parents are in the room? Okay, at least half. I think the next slide is a parenting slide, because it's a simple framework that a lot of people relate to. Even if you don't have children of your own, you've got nephews, nieces, friends that have children. In parenting, you have leadership moments all the time. It's just a matter of whether or not you're awake to them. And leadership is happening, leadership opportunities are happening around us all the time. It's just whether or not we're aware and we're actually driving those moments, or they're driving us. And with children, it's important to know when to lead, okay? Going on a bear hunt and knowing that the children are in the middle and they're safe, because that's your role to lead. But then you also need to know when to follow. Because when it's safe and when it's appropriate and situationally an opportunity for that child to lead you, you need to be able to let them lead and not let your own ego, your own agenda, your own need get in the way of that leadership moment for that other person. It doesn't matter if it's your child, your colleague, your coworker, your friend. These are applicable. Knowing when to lead and knowing when to follow are relevant in any relationship that you're in. Knowing when to get out of the way is just as important as being able to step up and take risks and have the courage to lead people. I would say it's even more important, because when you want to grow other leaders, you have to be willing to get out of the way. And that has to start quite young. So it's really, really important. It's something to just pay attention to. And just be aware within yourself, is there a leadership moment here? Now we're getting into other frameworks. So we've got the 5 whys. Why is something happening? What is your purpose behind something you're doing? And then you need to connect it to action. I use this framework all the time. Who's heard of Simon Sinek's Start With Why? It's a great framework. It's worth watching if you haven't seen it. I use this framework in everything I do. It's almost like an internal compass of why am I doing what I'm doing? What is my motivator? What's the purpose behind what I'm doing? What is the outcome that I want to get out of what I'm doing? What is in this situation? And how am I going to go about it? The key here is to get the alignment. So getting the alignment between why you're doing what you're doing, how you're going to go about doing it, and what that outcome looks like. And if you can do that, that's a really good framework for leadership, because if you can figure out how you do that for yourself, you're going to be able to help other people learn that too and lead them through that process. Same thing in business. Very, very similar context with different words. Macro is the driving forces of the trends. These are the things that are happening out in the world, whether we get out of bed or not. So what's happening in health? What's happening in government? What's happening in the environment? Those are those driving forces that we need to be aware of, those trends that are going to affect our business in the market, which is how we interact with our customer. The micro is us. It's our organization. It's our product, our service. Again, you need to have alignment between what is the trend that's out there, how does that trend meet the market, and how does my organization or my product or service meet that market as well, because you're both meeting in the middle. It's a really simple framework. It's easy to remember. So you've got why, how, what, and macro, market, micro. You can get those in your head and you can run that against decisions you're making just within seconds. Then with lateral leadership, you start integrating those. Okay? You start integrating those and they become exponential, because not only are you looking at your decisions, your why, how, what, your macro, market, and micro, and how they integrate and how they're driving, and are you getting the outcome, and do you have to change what you're doing? And it's a constant dynamic environment. But also then you start pushing out and saying, how is that affecting my stakeholder group? How is that affecting my competitor? How is that affecting my joint ventures? How is that affecting, if we want to get out of business, my family? So if I'm the stakeholder, I'm the mother, how is that affecting my partner, my children? What is my driver and what is their driver, and how do they relate? Because that is what you need to start being aware of as a lateral leader. Because if you start getting that integration and that synergy, everything gets easier. And the first thing is just being aware. Does that make sense? I'm waiting for somebody to say no. At some point, please. Okay. Love this quote, Tim Brown, IDEO, Design Thinking. He's definitely someone that I follow regularly. But this old idea that people were individually creative and that it was the individual ideas that were the most impactful is making a way for in the form of a new creativity. Now it's the ideas that emerge from networks. So again, we've got the network picture that are most innovative, because we as creative people have to understand how to participate in networks and how to create them. What we do is contextual. What we do is relational, even if we decide not to pay attention to it. So there's cause and effect. So how we make our decisions and how that impacts our different stakeholder groups is relevant and is something to take note of. A few tools to get there. Again, it's not either or, it's and. First, you start with divergent thinking. You want to get as big as you can, get as many ideas into the funnel as possible, and then when you get to a point where you have to make the final decisions, you move into convergent thinking, and you start to narrow down and weed out based on your purpose, based on your values, based on your drivers, based on your why, and whether you can do it, your how, and what you're actually looking for. Those become relevant when you move into the convergent thinking. And these are all IDEO frameworks, just so you know. Also, divergent and convergent, again, different sides of the same coin. And then also synthesis versus analysis. They both have a place. Sometimes you need to synthesize information, and sometimes you need to tear it apart and look at little details. It all depends on the driver. It depends on the purpose behind what you're doing. Another framework worth looking at is Tim Brown's IDEO framework around design thinking. And again, it's just acknowledging the holistic approach, which is to create the ultimate experience, you need to look at things from different angles and bring them together. So you need to look at the viability. Is my idea viable? You need to look at, do people want it? Is it desirable? And then you also need to look at whether or not it's feasible. Can I actually make it? And can I actually make it in a way that makes a business sense at the right cost, in the right time frame, for the right kind of people that want it? And again, it's looking at the holistic view.
But wonderfully, presumably from an IDEO perspective, it's starting with people. So before trying to optimize
Exactly.
your line, start with what people actually want, which presumably then plays back to your overall idea that it can't be the responsibility of the lady or the man at the top of the company dictating.
No.
Because how can they possibly know what their customer might want on aisle 4 on a Tuesday that day?
Exactly. And it, at every level, with every role within an organization, it is about the people. And whether it's the people in the organization or the people out of the organization, depending on your role, it's still about the people. And as was discussed, IDEO really does focus, it's very much focused on the people, and it's focused on empathy. So really being able to understand things from someone else's perspective, which is why I connect it to lateral leadership, because lateral leadership is about saying, what is my impact and how do I lead or follow? How do I empower others in the different ways?
So in practical terms for the audience, give us an example of something tomorrow that someone in the room could do to demonstrate lateral leadership.
I think tomorrow, I think the simplest example I can give you is, instead of looking away when you can see that someone in your stakeholder group, whether that's at home or at work, is uncomfortable about something, actually having the courage to say something. Are you okay? Is there something I can help you with? Is something not clear? Because we have those moments all the time when we go about our days where you can see that someone's actually either not happy, or they're struggling, or they're confused about something. They don't understand something, and we're silent.
But isn't that just being nice? What's the difference between being nice and lateral leadership?
I think the difference is, and that's a really good question, I think that there's a fine line, absolutely, between getting into someone's personal space and actually, helping someone move through something that helps them grow. And again, it takes emotional intelligence, but it really just takes someone being willing to pay attention. Because it's really not that hard to see that when you're asking someone a question with a genuine desire to help them, whether or not you're making them more or less uncomfortable. And it's so obvious, and we all have the skill set, and it's not hard. And what it does, it's the very first step, and you can apply it in anything you do to start opening those doors to allow for real conversations.
Because there'll be a group of people, whether they're in the room now or watching online, that say, look, that's lovely, but it's quite fluffy. And I'm not a fluffy, you don't understand my business because we're hard commercial, certain categories. But I guess your point is also that innovation, open sourcing, power of the crowd is actually what business is going to require for the disruptive period ahead of us.
If we can't meet people where they are to get the best talent, to understand what people want, and to be able to bring them into our organization, and a lot of times the best ones, you're going to do it on their terms. And you're not going to get them full time. The only way you can do that is by having real conversations. I mean, there's no choice. I mean, we can say that we can work around it, but that is where the disruption will happen. Because all innovation is tied to people.
But if they're literally thinking, and we're dealing with them, and they think they're laterally thinking.
Yep.
But they're not actually thinking, they're literally thinking, because that's the tendency of the brainwashing of humanity.
Sure. Yep.
that can create wider adverse problem in your communication with your staff or your management. I mean, I work on a solution-based factor called lateral and literal. Okay? So lateral thinking, if people don't understand what lateral thinking is, you can give an exercise out to create that understanding. For example, get 3 books, and each night open a chapter and read that book. The next night open a different chapter of the next book and read it, so you finish all 3 books. And then you will have an understanding of a lateral thinker. Okay? So if you have staff members, from my perspective, that are having problems with communication like that, you'll be able to send them away and give them something to do to see if they can see from a different point or a different aspect of how you're looking. And lateral, because you're talking lateral leadership. Lateral leadership is definitely the future. But most humans in schooling are taught literal thinking. Because everything is from A to B or 1 to 10 rather than lateral. So a lot of people, from my experience globally, do not understand literal as a word at all.
And I think you brought up 2 things that I think are really good to reiterate up here so that everybody gets it. One is a great exercise for lateral thinking is to take 3 books and read a chapter out of each book at one night after another until you finish all 3 books, and that starts to give you the experience of lateral thinking. The other, I think, is really, really important as a feedback for your previous question, which is what is something you can do tomorrow? And that is let someone that doesn't understand step into a different role, even if they're helping you with a little project that they've never done before, so that they start to walk steps of somebody else and start to get the different perspective. Different people will learn in different ways. So you have to figure out a way to open the door. And you're not going to get there with everyone. You've got to, because, time is of the essence, you've got to pick your battles, so to speak. But if you can bring people in and actually let people start to change roles, a lot of organizations, and I've been part of a few and in some conversations right now where we're talking about how can we swap employees or share employees so that we can start getting that exponential value. So instead of being afraid that we're going to lose someone by giving them away, we're actually making them better, because when they go into those other organizations, they see things so differently. They may even start to have a new appreciation for where they work, because they don't realize that the grass actually isn't greener on the other side. So having those experiences are critical, and that's great feedback. I love this. I found this the other day, which was, what are the hiring attributes for Google, the top list? What I loved is that they said that they do interview for technical capability. If you're a programmer, they need to make sure you know how to program, but they quickly get past that and they move right into cognitive ability. So the ability to process on the fly, to pull together disparate bits of information and act on it. Number 2 is leadership. Emergent leadership is very similar to lateral leadership if you start looking at the definitions. And it's, do you, at the appropriate time, step in and lead? And conversely, do you, at the appropriate time, step back and let other people lead? Being willing to relinquish power is just as important as a leader as being able to take command and take power and take control as needed. Having an ownership, a sense of responsibility to step in and try to solve any problem, yet the humility to step back and embrace the better ideas of others. So that's a fine line. It's like being able to step in and take charge, but being able to step back when you realize, actually, they've got a better idea than I do. I'm going to get out of the way.
So, I have a question.
Sure. Hello, Pascal.
Do you have any insights on how this is evidenced, before they make that decision?
So I know the cognitive testing, they run a series of tests, and you can find that online. I did read a little bit about it. I don't have the specifics of whether or not those other attributes on the list, like the leadership, and a lot of that can be tested with how we situationally deal with things. So I know most of it is around cognitive testing. But
we've had the privilege of having Google part of SparkLab, and 2 stories that were shared with us was one of the things now they can't do in any interview at Google is ask you what school you went to nor what university you attended, because they've said it's completely irrelevant. Because what was happening is people were going to incredible Ivy League universities, could memorize things brilliantly, be put in a situation and could not tolerate the rate of change at Google. And they also talked a lot about what they called T-shaped people. So they want people with a breadth of information. They should know a lot about a lot of things. A small amount about a lot of things, but real depth and a certain area of expertise. And that's the way their teams were formed, which was quite an interesting analogy.
Yeah. And to add to that, I didn't include it on the slide, but one of the last points of the article where I took those points from said they actually shy away from really high-end Ivy League schools because they find that the people that come from those schools are so competent and they've never failed. So they're so good at what they do. It's not a negative. They're so good at what they do that they don't know how to fail. And because they so need in their environment people to understand how to fail and to recover quickly and be resilient, that's actually, not a priority on their list. I may have that slightly wrong, but you get the point.
It paints quite a nice distinction, doesn't it, between an uptight, rigid business that can't fail because it's got to hit its deadlines and I know all the answers, so follow me, from a far more fluid organisation like a Google that says, we don't care what marks you got, we don't care where you've been, we care what you can bring. Come along on this journey, prepared to fail and fail quickly and move on.
And be responsive and get on with it. But look how big they are. You can scale with that kind of a culture. That's the most important thing to note. So I got a few case studies. This one's close to my heart because this is my current employer, Plus Group. So Plus Group is a group of vertically integrated companies. So they've been quite unique from the beginning in the sense that they continue to solve problems on the orchard, kiwi fruit orchard, where they've iterated out to form new businesses to solve different problems that they found on the orchard. They've been doing a lot of really cool stuff to disrupt horticulture for anybody that doesn't know about them. Anything from robotic kiwi pickers to orchard systems to drone mapping. We're just launching and commercializing an apple packer, and we also artificially pollinate kiwi fruit orchards. But let's move into lateral leadership. The reason I wanted to talk about them today is because they are now moving into a space where they have multiple stakeholders working together to create a collaborative platform across any crop. It's really consumer driven. It's primarily focused on the Maori space, so it has a heavy well-being component. And the reason I love this project so much and think that it's a good example of lateral leadership is because instead of saying, okay, I'm going to own all of this and I'm going to have everything my way, they're really letting others drive the demand and drive the decision, right down to the way that the technology is being brought. So Plus Group and a number of other stakeholders are building the platform, but they're saying it's open source. So we're getting mapping from public and private entities. We are having drones and satellite imagery and any number of sensing devices that can plug in, even if we don't own them, because the idea is about creating a platform that allows a farmer of any type to be able to get all their data in one place and to be able to visualize it in layers and actually make sense of it. So here's what it looks like as one example. And the idea is that you decide what your dashboard is, what feeds in can happen it will continue to iterate as technology speeds up, as the precision changes, the level of precision for what we can measure, whether it's the canopy density, or what's happening with the soil variation, to what's happening with the micro weather. All of that layering of data will continue to get dumped in, and it will change the way the system functions because the system will learn from the data and learn what's relevant to their customer, the end user, on a subscription model as it goes along. So They're not driving the decision. It's very, very consumer focused. And why are they doing it? Because there's a problem that needs to be solved. And the way it was brought to me was, it's just the right thing to do. It's just the right thing to do. And that's what lateral leadership is about. Enterprise Angels, also close to my heart, is doing something similar. They're building a platform to bring investment into one space so that people can understand what the investments are, and regardless of where they are and regardless of what the investment is, they can get the due diligence done to know that that investment has gone through a proper process to make sure that it's investor ready. So angel equity is, again, it is in its first iteration for angel members, but it's also meant to be for institutional investors. There's conversations about how can we white label it, and because Enterprise Angels is a nonprofit, how can we add value by bringing it to other investment communities? Again, because it's just the right thing to do. How can we share that value?
Tina, in your experience from a angel investment perspective, when someone looking for funding says, look, we've got this ethos, we're going to fail fast and often.
Yep.
Logically, you think that's not the sort of thing to say to someone just before I ask you for money, that we're going to fail frequently. Is that expected? Is that celebrated?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of answers that I'll say to that. First of all, you have to be really agile in a startup. So certainly at that macro level, at that company level with one investment, that founder needs to iterate. They need to fail fast, which means iterate,
yes,
respond and do something different so that they don't really fail. And that is what keeps that business alive.
Yes.
But if you look at the higher level of the portfolio of a typical angel investor, the typical portfolio you work towards is getting 10. 2 of them usually are the big hits that you get the exit on and you get your money back. The middle, 40%, 50% are called the living dead, which means that they aren't really growing, but they're not dead. They haven't failed. And you're constantly thinking, should I put more money in or should I just let it fail? And those are the worst, because it's kind of flatline. You don't want it to die because you don't want to be responsible for it dying, but you don't really want to keep putting money in if you're not going to get an outcome. And then, the other 2, 3, 4, depending on who you ask, flat out fail. Mm-hmm. And that is angel investment. That is the space. That is what you're buying into. But again, the business people that become angel investors do it because it's just the right thing to do. They want to use their skills to build the companies of tomorrow. They want to put their money in knowing that some of it will fail, but knowing that they can grow those serial entrepreneurs, knowing that they can grow the GDP over time. Because without that angel space, it's really hard to have the deal flow for the VC space. Mm. I mean, it really is the feeder, to a large degree.
So that question, if it was missed, was are they genuinely altruistic?
I think it depends. I think that what I've seen is that yes, there's no question about the fact that part of the game with angel investing is picking the right company, and you're not going in to just throw your money away. That's not the goal. And if you wanted to just give your money to charity, you would do that towards a purpose, and then that money would just be given away. But like I said earlier, angels they're kind of a hybrid. There's a part of it's altruistic because they really want to make an impact on the next generation, the next set of companies that are going to grow into and build the GDP for New Zealand or whatever country. But they also, yes, they want to make a buck. It's part of their investment portfolio. There's no question. But most of the angels I talk to that are really in it and that are really putting the money in are doing it from the heart. That's my experience. And I would say both in New Zealand and abroad, because I see that pattern when we went to the Angel Capital Association in May. You know, they're people that want to make an impact. So,
ladies and gentlemen, we have about 5 minutes, so I really would encourage any more questions now. At the...
Sure. Yeah, I don't mind sharing them.
Fantastic. So what we're likely to do is, on the business cards on your seats, there's the Facebook group specifically and the rest of the social media community, but we will look to post them to our Facebook group.
I'll just finish the Enterprise Angel story by saying the other thing they're doing that's lateral leadership is they've actually gone over and created to the U.S. and created a bunch of linkages for their ag tech companies that they've invested in New Zealand, because they've realized that, again, it's just the right thing to do for those investee companies. They need to be able to connect to the bigger markets, to connect to other investors. So that is helping them add that value that maybe means they get diluted as investors themselves, but it's just the right thing to do to get those companies to success. And to me, that's what lateral leadership is about. It's thinking beyond yourself. It's thinking about the network. It's thinking about the greater outcome. And I'll skip back to a few things to call to action, because do we have enough time?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I guess, to close, for me, it's great to be able to sit and talk about these ideas, but to me, it's about what are we going to do with them? I told you why I decided to talk about lateral leadership tonight, because I do feel like the way we think is how we then meet the world, and then how the world meets us. So how we bring ourselves to the world is how the world meets us. That's why I brought this to you today. Some of the calls to action that I have for you is, don't believe everything you think. That's a really easy one. If you can just start being aware of what your thoughts are, and just go, maybe don't have to believe all of those, maybe I'll test a few. Because if you do that, you'll be more aware of what your mindset is and how it affects your life. Also, be curious. Make the unfamiliar familiar. Say yes to things that make you uncomfortable and trust that you'll figure it out. I was saying earlier, when I was invited to do this talk and I was so excited, I got all these ideas together and I started laying them all out because I wanted to talk about everything. And then I framed it up, and then I submitted it, and it was accepted, which I was completely surprised by. And then I thought, I actually need to write a story about this now. And it forced me to look at my own ideas and frame them in a different way, which allowed me to grow. And for that, I was really grateful. And being curious accomplishes the same thing. It allows you to look around and say yes to things that are going to make you uncomfortable. Even more important, make the familiar unfamiliar. Let go of the mindsets that don't serve you. Let go of the things that you've been given that actually don't belong to you. Pay attention enough so you figure out what those are. And then finally, figure out how to lead and follow in your life, and where and when to do that. Find something that you can enact tomorrow and figure out what kind of an impact that can make.
And remove the word failure and replace it with resistance.
Failure is feedback.
Resistance is a better word, because
Yep.
humanity persists. When I do international business, if people use the word failure, I say to them, make sure that you remember it's only resistance.
Yep.
And you're only meeting resistance every time you perceive that you might have failed. There's no such thing as failure in the human consciousness.
Yeah. And a lot of times when you feel resistance, that's when you need to pay attention the most, especially when you're feeling that resistance within yourself. Then you're like, there's something there for you. Pay attention to it.
Any final questions from the floor? Well, that will bring us to a close. And Tina, thank you, because I think what you wonderfully captured this evening is that there is not a divide between what I'm like as a person and what I want to be as a business or someone involved in business. That we fall in love with people and their behaviours in the same way we fall in love with brands. And I think you wonderfully brought that to life together. So if you could join me, please. And as a small token of appreciation from Spark, There we are.
Thank
That is for
you.
you. And in the spirit of appreciation for all of the Spark customers that are in the room, an unapologetic plug and thank you to you. And the reason I say that is the only reason we've been able to do what we have is because a Spark customer suggested it and another one agreed. And as a consequence, we've done 153 nights like this. This finishes our first time coming into Tauranga. We move to Wellington next, then we're in Christchurch, then we're in Dunedin, and the intention is to come back. So we do these things. The only currency we ask for is feedback on the basis of iteration and improvement. And as I mentioned, the Mobi site that you use to come in on gives the opportunity to give us feedback. Tell us if you enjoyed this evening. Tell us if there were bits that you liked more than others. Tell us if we should come back. And if we did come back, who should talk and what should it be about? So that would be incredibly helpful for us to make sure this is a useful service. And if it can be truly useful, then we'll continue to do it. So please take the opportunity, if you take it, to sign up to be part of the Facebook group. There are 1,400 or so members that have joined us in the last 2.5 weeks. What's incredible about that site is a lot of what we've just heard this evening. People supporting one another, saying, I've got this business idea, but I don't have any money. Can anyone help me out? And people are coming up with that support. There's advice being swapped. It's the most incredible micronism of New Zealand business that's unfolding on that site. So we'd love to see you there. So once again, our sincere thanks for coming along this evening. We hope you enjoyed it. To our wonderful speaker, thank you.